Welcome to Deep Dive. In this episode, we talk about out-of-body experience and astral travel. We have one source, the book of Anthony Peake, titled The Out-of-Body Experience, The History and Science of Astral Travel.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've told us you're keen on getting up to speed quickly on some really intriguing topics, and today we're definitely doing that. We're looking at the out-of-body experience, the OBE.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, and we pulled together quite a range of sources, but our main guide for this is Anthony Peake's book, The Out-of-Body Experience, The History and Science of Astral Travel.
Peake's interesting because he connects different worlds, right? Academia, like Warwick and the LSE, but also groups like INDEs, that's the Near-Death Studies Association, and the Society for Psychical Research.
Exactly. He's really immersed in this field, engages with it from, multiple angles. He even runs an active online forum on these topics.
So our mission here isn't just, are OBEs real or not? It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. We're trying to unpack what these experiences might tell us about perception, about reality itself.
We want to explore the complexities, offer those surprising facts and different viewpoints, but, without making your head spin. Okay, so where do we start? Peake's own story seems like the place.
Right. Because he didn't start out as a believer. He was pretty skeptical, actually, until something happened near Lake Geneva. He took part in a session using something called an LL stimulator.
An LS stimulator.
Yeah, it's basically a device. This one was called the Lucid light machine that uses flickering lights at specific frequencies. Dr. Winkler and Dr. Paranormal were guiding the session. The idea is it can influence brain waves, maybe induce altered states.
Okay, so picture Peake, reclining chair, about 3 feet from this machine, this single eye, as he calls it. He closes his eyes.
And immediately he sees these flickering white lights. Standard enough. But then after just a couple of minutes, things change.
How so?
He starts seeing these internal explosions of intense blue light, then yellow, just inside his vision.
Huh. So he thought they were changing the machine's light.
That was his first thought, yeah. But he quickly opened his eyes just for a second, and nope, the external light was still just plain white.
Ah, so the colors were being generated internally.
Precisely. His own brain was creating them. And that's a really key point Peake makes. Our minds aren't just passive receivers. They actively construct what we perceive. This becomes crucial for understanding OBEs.
Okay, and it didn't stop there, did it? Things got more intense.
Oh, yeah. He mentions his eyes started vibrating, which sounds pretty uncomfortable. Then he notices movement, but in his peripheral vision.
Off to the side.
Right. So he turns his head towards it, but here's the weird part. Even though he's not looking at the light source anymore, the light sensation stays there in his periphery.
That is strange.
And as he focuses on that peripheral movement, he suddenly gets this overwhelming feeling that part of his awareness isn't in the chair anymore. It's somewhere else entirely.
Somewhere else, like where?
He perceives this vast plane made of black and white squares, like a huge checkerboard, stretching out to a distant bluish horizon, and he feels like he's suspended, maybe thousands of feet above it.
Wow. And his body. What was happening physically?
Strong reaction. His hands gripped the chair arms. He felt intense vertigo. And then this full body vibration started, a really powerful shaking.
Like the whole body?
The whole body. He described it as feeling like he was being lifted, almost launched out of the chair like a rocket.
Okay, I can see why he might get scared.
Absolutely. The fear just completely overtook the fascination. He asked them to turn the machine off. Instantly, boom, back to normal reality. Familiar surroundings.
That must have been incredibly jarring.
It was a major turning point for him, the catalyst for his whole investigation, really. He realized that whatever that experience was, it wasn't happening in what he calls consensual space, our shared everyday reality.
So it shifted his whole question.
Exactly. It wasn't just, are OBEs real anymore? It became, what is perception? What is the nature of reality if experiences like this are possible?
That's a much bigger question. And it connects to other stories he tells, right? Like the soldier?
Yeah, he mentions this anecdote about a former soldier who, years before Peake's experience, had this spontaneous OBE, just from sheer exhaustion, apparently.
And the soldier was convinced.
Absolutely certain he was awake outside his body, looking down at himself, sleeping. And that kind of account really challenges the simple materialistic view, that consciousness is only brain activity. Mm-hmm. How can you be wide awake and perceive yourself from outside?
It throws a wrench in the works, doesn't it? If consciousness is just brain stuff, how does that happen?
It's a big problem for that model. And then Peake adds his own little experience, much briefer, just this sudden feeling of being pushed out of his body while stepping onto a bus.
Just like that, unexpectedly.
Totally unexpected. And it highlights how these things can sometimes just happen suddenly, involuntarily, maybe closer to the surface than we think.
Which kind of naturally leads into how different cultures and traditions have thought about this stuff for ages.
Exactly. Peake makes the point that for millennia, many mystical and religious traditions haven't seen dreams and altered states as just, brain noise.
They saw them as something more.
Potentially, yeah. As windows, maybe, into other realities, spirit worlds, the realm of the gods, that sort of thing.
But shamanism.
Shamanism is a prime example. It's found all over Siberia, the Americas. And a core belief is the shaman's ability to consciously leave the body, to travel to other planes.
Did Peake talk to shamans?
He did. He mentions conversations with practitioners like Gary Plunkett and Sebastian Cheatham.
And what do they say about these other planes?
Well, they describe the middle world in shamanic terms. It's seen as a real place, but interestingly, one that's kind of constructed from the brain's own memory banks.
So it's populated by personal symbols.
Personal archetypes, symbols, yeah. Peake uses the example of trying to visualize what's behind your head right now, that internal construction process. That's sort of like the middle world.
And they encounter beings there.
Guides, yes. Often animal totems or teachers in human-like form who represent wisdom archetypes. Think Gandalf or Spock, Obi-Wan Kenobi, figures embodying deep knowledge.
So again, it sounds internal, yet deeply meaningful.
Right. And beyond that middle world, they talk about portals to an upper world, more ethereal, clouds, helpful beings, and also a lower world. It's like a whole structured inner cosmos.
Fascinating. And Peake also looks east, right? Towards Hinduism and Buddhism.
He does. Starts with Hinduism, incredibly ancient, spreads across Asia, really more than just a religion in some ways. And then Buddhism, emerging from Hinduism with Gautama Siddhartha's enlightenment.
And specifically Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes, the Vajrayana school. They have practices like dream yoga. They believe waking, sleep, and dreaming aren't totally separate states. They correspond in a way to life, death, and rebirth.
Okay, and didn't this connect back to that light machine Peake used?
It did, yeah. This is pretty striking. When Dr. Winkler took the LL stimulator technology to Tibet, practitioners from the Bon tradition, which is related to Tibetan Buddhism, and also dream yoga practitioners, they tried it out.
The same machine.
The very same. And they described the experience, the sort of non-dual source of consciousness it seemed to reveal, as a multicolored sphere of light.
And that matched their own traditional understanding.
Exactly. It was a powerful convergence of modern tech and ancient mystical insight.
Wow. And there was something about the pineal gland, too.
Yes. In the Bone tradition, they apparently consider ossified, fossilized elephant pineal glands as holy relics.
Seriously? Elephant pineal glands.
Seems so. It's this ancient reverence that hints maybe at a perceived link between the pineal gland and these states of consciousness. We'll definitely come back to the pineal gland later.
Okay, definitely want to hear more about that. What about Western mysticism, Kabbalah?
Peake touches on Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition. It describes our world emanating from the One, usually called YHVA, through different levels, getting more physical.
Different levels.
4 main worlds, as they call them. Atziluth is the highest, fire, the divine mind. Then Bariah, air, the world of archetypes. Then Yetzirah, water, which is considered the astral plane. And finally Asaya, earth, our material world.
And how does the human mind fit in?
Kabbalah describes 3 parts to the psyche. Yetzirah, the divine self, linked to fire, intuition, true will. Guf is the physical body. And in between is Ruach, the everyday self, linked to earth.
So the everyday self, the Ruach, can it access these other levels?
That's the idea. In dreams or altered states, the Ruach can potentially encounter Yetzirah, the astral plane, and gain insights, intuitions.
And is this astral plane just space? Or does it have features?
It's described with quite specific locations and imagery. Yesod has this pale light filled with thought forms from Earth. Hod is like a fairy tale palace, a magical lab, an observatory. Netzach is all nature, green things. And Tifereth is grand, like Versailles, under a bright blue sky, very detailed.
A whole inner landscape. Okay, what about theosophy?
Theosophy, yeah. Founded in the late 19th century, they believed in many hidden levels of mind and reality, populated by beings, accessible both inside and out. Physical matter was seen as the lowest plane, with higher planes being more spiritual.
And these planes could interact.
They believed they overlapped, allowing some limited access between them. They talked about an etheric body that could travel within our physical plane by using this overlap with the astral plane.
So kind of like an early concept of an OBE.
Potentially, yes. And significantly, Helena Blavatsky, a key figure in theosophy, claimed her Tibetan teachers identified the pineal gland as the seat of the highest consciousness.
There's the pineal gland again.
It keeps popping up. Blavatsky's student, C.W. Leadbeater, expanded on this, suggesting the pineal gland focuses energies from higher planes. He also had this idea of evolving through 7 different bodies to become more spiritual.
And they had another interesting concept, the Akashic record.
Right. The Theosophists introduced that idea, like a universal database recording everything, every action, thought, feeling, experience ever, accessible in higher states of consciousness, sort of like a cosmic library.
Which feels like a good segue into near-death experiences, NDEs.
It really is. Peake has been involved with IND, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, for a long time. He saw NDEs as maybe a way to scientifically investigate psychic phenomena.
And modern interest really kicked off with one specific case, didn't it?
Dr. George Ritchie's case, yeah. Raymond Moody stumbled upon it. Ritchie was pronounced dead in 1943 from pneumonia, then revived.
And his account was incredibly detailed.
Astonishingly so. He described waking up, seeing his own body on the bed. Hospital staff ignored him. He walked through a ward boy.
Walked through him.
That's what he reported. Then he found himself floating outside the hospital, still in his pajamas, but not feeling the cold.
He could move around?
Yes, he found he could control his speed, floated down near a river, but people just looked through him. He passed through a metal guy wire. That's when it hit him. He wasn't solid.
What did he think?
His first worry was about his medical career. Then he flew back to the hospital looking for his body. He identified it by his fraternity ring.
On a body under a sheet.
Exactly. He realized he was seemingly dead. And then came the classic NDE elements.
The light.
An incredibly intense light filled the room. He encountered a being of light. He assumed it was Jesus. He was told he had to go back. And he experienced a life review.
Seeing his whole life flash before him.
Something like that, yes. Then suddenly he was back in his body, under the sheet. An orderly found a faint pulse. A doctor gave him adrenaline.
And he recovered. Fully.
Fully. No brain damage, despite apparently not breathing for 9 minutes. His commanding officer called it a miracle.
That's an incredible story. And Moody found others like it.
He did. That was the surprise. These experiences were common, just not talked about. His book, Life After Life, coined the term near-death experience and really opened the floodgates for research.
And other researchers confirmed this.
Dr. Michael Saubaum studied cardiac arrest patients, found 43% reported an NDE, with features very similar to Moody's findings. Consistent patterns.
Peake also mentions an older case, right?
Yeah.
Someone who could leave their body before death.
Yes, Dr. Joseph Issel's patient, terminally ill, claimed she could leave her body at will, and she apparently gave veridical proof, described a woman writing a letter in another room just before she died.
Veridical proof, meaning it was confirmed.
Exactly, information she couldn't have known normally. Interestingly, she didn't report a typical NDE structure, suggesting maybe a conscious OBE before death is slightly different.
But there are cases of veridical perception during NDEs.
Oh, yes. These are really compelling. The famous Maria Shu case at Harborview Medical Center. A patient resuscitated after a heart attack described a specific tennis shoe on an outside window ledge.
A place she couldn't see from her room.
Physically impossible from her room. Yes, she saw it from an out-of-body perspective.
Any others?
The Evergreen study had a woman accurately describe details of her own emergency surgery from an overhead perspective. Dr. Penny Sartori's UK study found NDEs often reported clear, colored, panoramic vision and detailed memories, unlike fuzzy dreams.
Have there been attempts to test this scientifically, like in controlled settings?
There have. Dr. Holden and Chaplain Jostin tried, but had limited cases. Madeleine Lawrence used hidden LED displays during procedures where cardiac arrest was induced briefly. Results were inconclusive, often due to low numbers of patients actually reporting OBEs during the procedure.
But the anecdotal cases, like Vicky.
Vicky's case is remarkable. Blind from birth, yet during 2 NDEs, she reported seeing things visually.
Seeing, but she was blind.
That's what she reported. Details like a shaved part of her head, streetlights, houses, flowers, deceased relatives, the being of light, the life review. It really challenges our assumptions about perception and senses.
Absolutely. Okay, so shifting from NDEs to more deliberate exploration. Robert Monroe.
Robert Monroe, yes, a pioneer in exploring OBEs intentionally. His first one was accidental, though, after doing some mental exercises he was experimenting with.
Accidental? What happened?
Well, interestingly, he got intense stomach pains after the first time. Then he started experiencing these spontaneous vibrations and temporary paralysis when resting. Happened frequently.
That sounds alarming.
It was, initially. He described the feeling of being outside his body and just panicking, trying to get back in. But eventually he started exploring it deliberately.
And yes, that key question, right? Dream or reality?
Or both, like lucid dreaming. Exactly.
Yeah.
He started mapping out these different environments he encountered, which he called localis. He also reported encountering what seemed like independent, self-motivated entities there.
Localis. What was Locale 1 like?
Locale 1, according to Monroe, was basically our physical world.
Yeah.
Geographically the same. He thought it had potential for getting verifiable information.
Did he try?
He did. He tried to visit his friend Dr. Bradshaw's house, but he described it as strangely difficult, feeling like unseen forces were helping him, and he couldn't get Bradshaw's attention at all.
So the verifiable proof was tricky even there.
It seemed to be. And Peake suggests this difficulty in getting solid proof from Locale 1 might be why Monroe later focused more on Localis 2 and 3.
Which were harder to verify.
Much harder. Locale 2 was like a transitional zone, less tied to physical reality, more fluid.
And Locale 3.
Totally different realities, apparently, including an alternative Earth. He described finding a hole leading to a black void he thought was deep space, shaking hands with someone from the void.
Shaking hands with someone from a void.
That's the account. And receiving a business card. He also described entering an alternate Earth, technologically slightly different, and meeting an alternate version of himself, I there, he called him.
An alternate self. That really opens up questions about reality.
Absolutely. Later, Monroe used his technology hemispheric synchronization to focus on exploring Locale 3.
And there was that strange incident in the lab.
Right. During an OBE under lab conditions, he reported suddenly feeling difficulty breathing. Which is weird because his physical body was breathing fine. It suggests some kind of non-local link or communication between his perceived astral self and his physical self. What caused it? Still a mystery.
Okay, so that leads us towards psychic phenomena like remote viewing.
Exactly. Peake discusses the work at Stanford Research Institute, SRI, by physicists Hal Pluthoff and Russell Targ. They were studying psychic abilities.
And Ingo Swann was involved.
Ingo Swann was a key participant. Early tests involved him describing objects in sealed boxes. Mixed results, but one impressive hit was describing a live moth accurately.
And then he suggested using coordinates.
Yeah, Swint proposed trying remote viewing based purely on geographical map coordinates.
How's that go?
Well, some examples Peake gives. 75 north, 45 west, Swann says ice. Plausible for Greenland or Baffin Island, 15 north, 120 east. Land, jungles, mountains. Likely Indonesia. 38 north, 29 west, ocean, Spain in the distance. That's the Azores, pretty accurate.
But those are quite general descriptions.
They are, and that's the room for skepticism, Peake acknowledges, but then there are more specific tests.
Like Kerguelen Island.
Right, sub-Antarctic island. Swann described geographical features, buildings with an antenna, cylindrical tanks, a small airstrip, trucks. A lot of that fits a remote research station. The airstrip in 72 is debatable, but other details seem plausible.
And the U.S. East Coast location.
That one was apparently very accurate. Rolling hills, a city to the north with smog, military-style lawn, possible bunkers, flagpole, highways west, river east, more city south. Matched a specific target location closely?
You could even identify people.
Reportedly, yes.
Yeah.
Identifying which experimenter would be at a target site, again with high accuracy.
They really pushed the boundaries, didn't they? Viewing Jupiter.
They did. Swann was asked to remote view Jupiter. He described high atmospheric crystals like rings.
Before the rings were officially discovered.
Yes. Voyager 1 confirmed Jupiter's faint rings in 1979. Swann's viewing was before that, so potentially a very significant hit.
And there was another Jupiter viewing with Harold Sherman.
Simultaneously, Swann and Sherman, 2,000 miles apart, both apparently described the same huge mountain range on Jupiter, maybe 31,000 feet high.
But Jupiter doesn't have mountains, right?
Yeah.
It's a gas giant.
According to current science, no solid surface, no mountains like that, extreme pressure and temperature.
So what was going on?
Peake offers a really interesting possibility. Maybe they weren't viewing Jupiter itself, but its moon, Io.
Io? Why Io?
Well, Io's surface is reddish, yellowish, brownish. Someone not deeply familiar with astronomy might mistake it for Jupiter. But crucially, Io has volcanoes.
And did they mention volcanoes?
Sherman specifically described volcanic peaks, and the existence of Io's volcanoes was only confirmed by Voyager 1 in 1977, just before their viewing session.
So they might have accurately described Io, thinking it was Jupiter?
It's a plausible explanation, misidentified target, but accurate details for the actual potential target. Pretty compelling if that's what happened.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. Peake mentions the International Academy of Consciousness, IAC.
Yes, a Brazilian organization founded by Dr. Waldo Vieira. It grew out of his own OBEs and extensive research.
He wrote a big book on it.
Huge. Projectiology, a panorama of experiences of the consciousness outside the human body. Peake calls it exhaustive. Vieira aimed to create a science of consciousness, conscientiology, based on a multidimensional reality, unlike the standard single-level view.
And they have research facilities.
In Portugal, yes. A projectarium, a spherical sensory deprivation building, and an immobilitarium for studying waking physical immobility. Their focus, projectiology, is about systematically studying the exomatic state consciousness outside the body using scientific methods.
Trying to get empirical evidence.
Exactly, a structured scientific approach to OBEs.
Okay, let's circle back to the pineal gland. It keeps coming up.
It really does. Esoteric traditions, like the Theosophists, saw it as a stargate to enlightenment. Carrington and Muldoon linked it to OBEs way back in 1929.
And more recently.
Gerald Oster's work on binaural beats showed you could potentially use sound to influence specific brainwave frequencies, like the 4 Hz theta waves often associated with meditation and altered states.
Then there's Tom Campbell's theory, my big toe.
Right, my big toe-y theory of everything. It's a fascinating model. He suggests reality is like a filter, shaped by our individual experiences and beliefs. This creates our personal physical matter reality, PMR,
Within a larger reality.
a much broader non-physical matter reality, NPMR. He uses analogies like a bacterium in an intestine having a limited view, or that maybe apocryphal story of Native Americans not initially seeing European ships because they were outside their reality framework.
So our shared reality is kind of a consensus.
A shared illusion, Campbell suggests, arising from similar biology and cultural norms. Even language shapes it. Think Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the Hopi concept of time.
And dreams or altered states are glimpses of NPMR.
That's his idea. We encounter NPMR, but we interpret it through the symbols and metaphors of our familiar PMR.
Peake also brings in Ekankar.
Yes, which might seem unrelated, but their teachings on soul travel are very much like OBEs. They talk about the surat, soul, or attention, focusing on the pineal gland using mantras, Simran.
The pineal gland again.
Always the pineal gland.
Yeah.
The goal is perceiving the shabd, an inner sound current, a source of light. Paul Twitchell, Ekankar's founder, had links to Saint Mat, which also emphasizes inner sound and light.
And how does Ekankar view the astral plane?
As the source of emotions, psychic stuff, ghosts, even UFOs. It sounds a bit like Monroe's locale too, that transitional space. They also describe a rushing sound and feeling of speed during soul travel, similar to NDE accounts.
Which brings us back to that core question. Are these experiences real travel, or something more like incredibly vivid, controllable dreams? Lucid dreams.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? The mystery of lucid dreaming itself is a big piece of the puzzle. Stuart Twemlow's 1976 survey found many people reporting OBEs in environments different from their physical location.
Suggesting lucid dreams.
It strongly suggests it. He also mentions false awakenings, dreaming you've woken up, which can lead to dream-based OBEs, like seeing your body in bed from within the dream.
So what exactly is lucid dreaming?
Simply becoming aware that you are dreaming while you're dreaming. You shift from just being in the dream to being an observer of the dream, sometimes even able to influence it.
And how does Tom Campbell see lucid dreams in his model?
As just another level of these nested, illusory realities. For him, a lucid dream is just as real as our waking reality. Both are externally generated illusions, just different types.
The lines get blurry.
Very blurry. Twemlow and Gabbard's research noted lucid dreaming is much more common than spontaneous OBEs, though Peake seems surprised by how high the numbers are for both.
And Ian Wilson's experiences sound pretty wild. Mapping.
Yeah, Wilson described consciously manipulating precognitive dreams seemingly about the future to try and influence that future.
Influence reality through dreams.
That's the claim. He even provides an account of making a visible triangle appear on a colleague's forehead, supposedly with photographic and witness backup. If true, the implications are, well, enormous.
Mind-bending. Peake also had a personal experience that didn't feel like a dream.
Right. Something while falling asleep, A vivid perception of a scene in a foreign city, but with no sense of himself in it, no selfhood, like spontaneously accessing some other level of reality, completely impersonal.
Okay, let's shift to the brain itself. What does neuroscience say about OBEs?
Dr. Olaf Blank's work is key here. He stimulated a patient's brain, specifically the angular gyrus, and induced OBE-like feelings floating spatial confusion.
So, stimulating the brain can cause these feelings.
It seems so. Blank later did experiments at EPFL Lausanne using virtual reality. They deliberately created a mismatch between what people felt and what they saw, making them feel outside their virtual bodies. This research focused on the right temporal parietal junction, the TPJ.
And others did similar work.
Henrik Ursen at UCL added stereo vision to the VR, creating a more compelling illusion of seeing your own body from afar.
But Peake has a critique of these studies.
He does. He argues that while they replicate some sensations, the floating, the disorientation, they often miss that key element reported in spontaneous OBEs, actually seeing your own physical body from that outside perspective.
That specific visual component is often missing in the lab.
Often, yes. Blank also found stimulating the right angular gyrus caused the floating feeling, while stimulating the left one caused a feeling of a shadowy figure behind the person.
Interesting distinction.
It suggests the angular gyrus is definitely involved in spatial self-perception, how we know where our body is, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the sole cause of the full, complex OBE experience people describe.
Okay, back to the pineal gland is this potential gateway. The brain is incredibly complex.
The most complex thing we know, yeah. And self-awareness is still a huge mystery. We know about glial cells for support, neurons for electrical signals.
Neurotransmitters like glutamate are involved.
Crucial for communication between neurons. But too much glutamate, say under extreme stress, can be toxic excitotoxicity.
Can damage brain cells.
Right. But the brain has natural protectors, these endocytosins that seem to counteract glutamate overload, which leads to an interesting thought.
Could OBEs be a side effect?
Could they be a protective mechanism kicking in during extreme stress? A side effect of the brain protecting itself. It's one idea. But then Peake introduces DMT, dimethyltryptamine.
DMT, that comes up a lot in discussions of altered states.
It does. Peake sees it as potentially key, maybe linking to parallel universes and providing a neurochemical basis for OBEs. Dr. Rick Strassman famously proposed the pineal gland releases DMT at death, causing NDEs.
Which ties back neatly to Blavatsky, Carrington, Muldoon, even Monroe's hemisync, all pointing towards the pineal.
It's a recurring theme, and the big breakthrough was finding DMT isn't just something you take from outside, it's endogenous.
The brain makes it itself.
Yes, they found the specific receptors it binds to. This is huge because it means DMT-related experiences, OBEs, NDEs, maybe lucid dreams, remote viewing could be entirely natural states, part of our inherent biology, with a purpose.
Natural states. And there was something about a sound.
Researcher Beach Barrett noted a pulsing or woofing sound, like a pressure wave, that seems to precede potential DMT release, which sounds a lot like the vibrations Monroe described before his OBEs.
And Barrett had a wild hypothesis about the pineal gland.
Yeah, that it could be a wormhole. Using an Einstein-Rosen bridge to project consciousness into parallel realities.
Okay, explain Einstein-Rosen bridges simply. Wormholes.
Basically, theoretical shortcuts through space-time, linking distant points. The physics gets complex, and a big issue is whether physical matter could actually survive passing through one, likely involving black holes.
But consciousness isn't physical matter in the same way.
That's the idea. Maybe consciousness could use such a bridge. And considering atoms are mostly empty space, Barrett speculates about micro black holes, micro wormholes, potentially existing even within the brain. Highly speculative, of course.
It's definitely speculative,
Yeah.
but it connects to fundamental physics.
Which Peake dives into next. The historical quest to understand reality. Democritus and atoms. Dalton's atomic theory in chemistry.
Finding elements have unique light signatures.
Allowing astronomers to map the universe's composition. But the common sense idea that solid stuff is made of solid atoms turns out to be wrong.
Matter is mostly empty space.
Right. Solidity is an illusion of forces and quantum effects. Then Ørsted links electricity and magnetism. Faraday develops the field concept. Maxwell proves light is electromagnetism.
And visible light is just a tiny sliver of the spectrum.
A tiny fraction. Then comes Planck, quantum theory, energy in discrete packets, quanta. Quantum physics is born.
Which introduced uncertainty.
Deep uncertainty. The Copenhagen interpretation Bohr, Heisenberg, Born, suggested particles exist as waves of probability until observed. Observation collapses the wave function into a definite state.
So observation creates reality, in a sense.
At the quantum level, it seems fundamental. Less obvious in our macro world, but maybe still underpinning it. It resonates with Campbell's idea of PMR being pulled into existence by observation.
But Einstein wasn't happy with this. Spooky action at a distance.
The EPR paradox, yeah, challenged Copenhagen. But then Bell's theorem and Ellen Aspect's experiments prove non-local entanglement is real.
Particles linked instantly, no matter the distance.
Seems so, suggesting a deeper interconnectedness than we thought.
Which brings us to David Bohm.
Bohm's implicate order. He saw the universe less like a machine, more like a hologram. Everything enfolded within everything else at a deeper level.
The implicate order. And we see the explicate order.
Exactly, like projections from that deeper reality. He proposed a quantum potential enabling non-local communication. This functions in the seemingly empty space at tiny scales. His analogy was the fish in the aquarium viewed by two cameras looks like two fish, but it's one.
So OBEs, remote viewing, could be tapping into this implicate order.
That's Bohm's suggestion. Consciousness isn't stuck in the brain. It's part of this interconnected whole, potentially accessing information anywhere within it.
Okay, another interpretation. Many worlds. Hugh Everett.
Everett's idea. No wave function collapse. Instead, the universe splits at every quantum choice point, creating countless parallel universes. Every possibility happens somewhere.
So those weird dream locations, maybe glimpses of other universes.
It's a mind-bending implication. And related concepts like Hawking and Hertog's observer-created universe suggest all possibilities exist in superposition until our observations select the reality we experience.
We even see quantum effects on a large scale sometimes.
Like quantum coherence, Bose-Einstein condensates. Particles acting as one collective entity. Hints that quantum weirdness isn't just microscale. Maybe large-scale quantum effects happen in the brain too.
So where does this leave consciousness?
Peake suggests maybe consciousness isn't in the brain, but is fundamental, part of Bohm's implicate order, everywhere, enfolded within the universe and containing it. A matrix holding all information, a potential model for the exomatic or out-of-body experience.
Which leads to his final perspective, the intrasomatic experience.
Right. He circles back to the lack of really solid, repeatable, veridical proof for external OBEs. We hear lots of reports. Surveys show they're surprisingly common, but that slam dunk evidence of perceiving our physical world accurately from outside the body, it's elusive.
So he connects the dots differently.
He links the endogenous DMT, Barrett's pineal wormhole idea, Everett's many worlds, and suggests maybe OBEs aren't journeys out into our world, locale one.
The journeys.
Journeys in, shifts of consciousness, perhaps via that pineal DMT mechanism, through a wormhole into other realities, Everett's parallel universes.
Ah, so that would explain why the veridical information often doesn't quite match our reality.
Exactly, because the person might be observing a slightly different parallel version of reality.
Okay, and he brings in the 0-point field.
Yeah, drawing a parallel with the old search for the luminiferous ether for light waves, which didn't exist. The modern idea is the 0-point field, ZPF, filling all space, the universe's ground state. Irvin Laszlo even links it to the Akashic field idea.
Energy everywhere, even at absolute zero.
0-point energy, ZPE, everywhere, even inside atoms in that empty space.
So the final thought connects all this.
Could enlightenment be opening consciousness to these many levels of reality, mediated perhaps by light and the ZPF? And could the OBE, framed as an intrasomatic experience, be a journey within this vast, interconnected, multi-layered reality?
Wow. Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. From Peake's own startling experience, through ancient mystical views, NDE research, Robert Monroe's localis, remote viewing strangeness,
Neurochemistry, DMT, the pineal gland, right up to quantum physics and the nature of reality itself, all trying to understand the OBE.
And hopefully you've had some of those aha moments. We really shifted from just asking, is it real, to exploring perception, reality, consciousness.
The potential role of the pineal, of DMT, the truly mind-bending ideas from quantum physics like non-locality, Bohm's implicate order, many worlds.
And this final idea that maybe OBEs aren't out of body in our space, but intrasomatic journeys into other dimensions or realities.
We hope this journey through these complex ideas fits with your interest in getting a thorough understanding of fascinating topics. Has it maybe challenged or expanded how you think about consciousness? About what's possible?
And maybe just one last thought to leave you with. If our everyday reality is just one layer, one possibility within this incredibly vast, interconnected multiverse, What other extraordinary experiences might be waiting for us, accessible perhaps right here within the landscape of our own minds? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.